Welcome everyone to today's guest expert interview. Today I'm joined by Suzanne Alexander. Suzanne is a previous financial advisor and a money mindset expert. Um, I'll let her introduce herself because she will do a much better job than I. But we're here to talk today about this idea of understanding your relationship with your money and why it's so important that you know yourself as well as part of that process. So, welcome, Suzanne. Thanks for joining us.
No, thank you very much for having me. I'm Suzanne Alexander. I'm the founder of Mindful Finances. I've been involved in the finance industry for over 15 years. 8 of those were as a financial advisor. And during COVID, I actually stepped away from financial advising and moved into financial coaching. And part of that was driven by an identified need that I'd seen that there was a bit of a gap between what the clients were telling me they were doing or what they wanted and what they were actually physically carrying out. Thank you.
So interesting, isn't it? It's also one of the reasons that we focus a lot on financial mindset, psychology, and money mindset in Money Happy too, because a lot of the happiness or unhappiness, if you want to simplify it to that, or the well-being aspect of finances comes down to this really important relationship we have with ourselves and our money and finances. So, and one of the things that we sort of talk a lot about in this context of financial mindset is that money, personal finance, investing, all these topics are taught as maths-based subjects. And what you and I both know is that the money decisions that we make aren't made by calculators, they're made by us, they're waking beings. So, aside from that being, I don't say that to make an obvious point, but it's really just that the decision framework for making financial decisions about what you do with money isn't based on the data alone. And it's actually filtered through this really unique, very personal mental model of the world. And so what I really wanted to start with today is, what is this relationship with money and why is it so important to know yourself in order to better understand how and what you do with your money?
Yeah, so let me precursor this that we all tend to feel we should know about money. And you're so right, because even having worked in the finance side, the focus was more on the logical, the technical side, the numbers, rather than the emotional side, which is where the financial coaching comes in. And we actually make 90% of our decisions are driven by an emotional context. So if you think about that, if you think about the decisions you make on a daily basis, they're actually made by an emotion that's connected to that. And so when we start to explore this relationship and why we want to really understand what our limiting or core beliefs are, is because those core beliefs will actually be driving the decisions we make today. So when we're born, I'm not sure if you explain this in your community, but when we're born, we have what is classified as or called the unconscious mind. And during that stage, which is 0 to 7, and this is the formative years of when we also develop our core beliefs, we just are observing and taking in and being taught all of these, narratives and stories around money. And that's through, even just observing the discussions that parents or family have around money, watching how money is treated within that environment. And so from there, we actually create our understanding of our interpretation of what money is, because money is emotional, and then we are essentially attaching it to those core beliefs. So just to give you an example, some of those core beliefs might be, I have to work hard for money. Money doesn't grow on trees. It could go into more emotional ones, which is I'm not worthy of money. I'm unwanted. So again, your family environment and the community that you grew up in will determine what those core beliefs are. And the core beliefs aren't just about you, it's about others, it's about the world, and it's also about what you are putting in place for your future. So all of those core beliefs will determine how you'll live your life because you'll essentially keep coming back to that. Just to stack on top of that, we subconsciously, so from age 7 onwards, we form what is the subconscious mind. Sorry, the conscious mind. And this is when we're actually consciously making a decision. So we're thinking through that process. That's that 10% versus the 90%, which is being used by, what we've developed in those formative years. And what happens is we actually go out and seek information. It's called confirmation bias to confirm our beliefs. And it's actually done in a way we actually negate anything else that might be contradictory. So it'll be sort of pushed to the side. It's like having a tunnel vision on. So we actually go out most confirming that. So say, you had busy parents growing up and you might have walked away from that and given that experience a narrative or the belief around that was I'm unwanted or I'm unloved. And then how does that sort of play out moving on is that you go to the school ground and, there's bullying. And so that bullying impact comes in and suddenly that's just reconfirming I'm unwanted or I'm unloved. And then we take that into a work environment and maybe you're overlooked for career opportunities, or maybe you're not supported in a way you feel you need to be. Again, so it's carried through. And so what's happening during that whole cycle is that we are seeking out this confirmation bias to confirm our beliefs. Because beliefs are, they're pretty much, it's like the world is square around.
Oh, yeah. So there's so much to unpack just even in what you've given us there. But I think the one of the first things I want to say just off the back of that last point you made about, giving that example of a young person who, is maybe left alone a lot and then develop this feeling or beliefs of being unloved or unlovable and as a result they carry that through into their adult and work lives. So that's an example of, so these core beliefs don't necessarily have to be about money. They can be just core beliefs about self. And then that is then something that starts to show up in your financial life or the level of success or the level of difficulty that you're experiencing because of those beliefs. And so is that where this relationship between knowing yourself and understanding your financial situation, circumstances, decision making, is that the link?
Yeah, you've hit it, right on the head because essentially the beliefs we have around money will also be sort of tied into the personal beliefs we have around ourselves.
Yeah.
So if you think about it, someone that might have grown up with a scarcity mindset, so a family where, money was hard to come by, you have to work hard for money. There could be that attachment that, I'm not worthy of money. So, or I'm not worthy. And then you're attaching to that, I'm not worthy of money, which means I have to work even harder than everyone else to be able to achieve a level of, financial remuneration. Where someone with an abundance mindset that might come in and they're grown up in an environment that they're quite secure in their beliefs. So they've got really confident beliefs around, the world is a safe place, everyone is friendly. Then that abundance of, well, I can go in and do my work. I don't have to work my, backside off necessarily, but I'll be remunerated because of the skills I bring.
Yeah.
So see that change in the mindset. And it's almost, Tim Ferriss has this book, 4-Day Week, and talking about it's not necessarily the hours you're putting in. It's actually talking about how like the efficiency that you're putting in. But if you're coming from a scarcity mindset, it might be focused more towards the hours, whereas an abundance mindset is focused towards around, I guess, the content that you're bringing.
Yeah. Absolutely. So that's really good example of how that can play out for you in a workplace, or in your work life career, and how that then plays into um, your financial output or your financial outcomes. What about in other areas of your life that could potentially influence your financial success and position? And I'm speaking now basically around personal relationships. So are these stories that are, prevalent, or some that are more common, that can lead to circumstances where people find themselves um, in a relationship and in a financial situation that's not desirable or not where they want to be?
Yeah, so more often than not, the relationship you have with yourself and those beliefs that you form can unfortunately attract a similar partner to exactly not what you want.
Mhm.
Uh, so if you're in, you've got really challenging beliefs around self-worth, then sometimes you can attract people that may take advantage of that. And again, that's that confirmation bias. So I've just confirmed that, not everyone is safe, or you're going into, say, a work environment and you feel like you're doing so much more work than others. Again, it's reconfirming, from that relationship perspective, I always have to work so much harder than others and I feel taken advantage of. So from a relationship perspective, again, it's just an understanding that we all have our own interpretation of the world, and we all have our own beliefs, both personally and around finances. And more so around finances when you come into a relationship, because we talk about, opposites attract. But when we come from a financial perspective, when it's opposites, it can cause a lot of conflict. You've got someone who, loves to spend money versus someone who comes from an environment or a belief that money isn't to be spent, or you shouldn't spend money on yourself. That's where the conflict comes in. And I see that quite a bit with talking with couples. The conversation will go like, this person spends all the money in the family. They don't understand. And then the other one's like, well, they don't want to have any fun. We can't even go out for dinner because they won't spend a cent. And it's understanding that both of you have actually come into a relationship with completely different benchmarks of how you perceive the world and your beliefs around your own level of self-worth, and also how you interpret money. So how you've attached that. So again, someone with a scarcity mindset may come from, a lower sense of worth. And so bringing that in with the money component, it's almost like with a scarcity mindset, you hoard onto money. You've just got to hold it, because the
Mhm.
fear is it's so hard to make and it's so hard to get more of.
Where does that scarcity mindset come from? Like, if you were, as parents, like I'm a parent, and we just think, well, you know, especially when we work in this field, we're very conscious of these issues, and how they play out in our adult life. Like we're just discussing in workplace, in relationships, even with our own relationship with money. And we sort of, I myself look to I've got two daughters, and I think, what are the messages that I'm sending them about money with how I behave around money, or how I talk about money, or how I, you know, interact with money in their presence in terms of what I buy or what I don't buy, or how I explain these things to people. So how is it, is there research on how scarcity mindset is actually formed? Like, is there a do's and don'ts list in terms of, you know, preventing the next generation from encountering these issues with, in their own adult and life?
Yeah. Look, I would love to say there's a rule book, and I would also love to say there's a rule book on, how to raise children. And there's so many books out there, but there's not one that is the ultimate book that you
No.
all. The thing with money beliefs is they actually can be generational. And so if we go back to what I mentioned at the start around we feel we should know about money, and I did a recent comment through my social media accounts, what did you learn around money at school? And the general consensus was open a bank account and that's it. Maybe put some money in there. The reality is it comes back to understanding, you know, that relationship with money. So our parents are usually the ones that teach us about money. Their parents taught them about money. Their parents taught them about money. So we're talking about a generational handing down money knowledge. And if you haven't actually gone out, educated yourself around money, worked in, a financial environment or, sought out other people, Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, he understood that, through just, meeting, Rich Dad, that there was a massive difference and he could either choose to go down and take in the beliefs of what his, dad was telling him, or he could actually look at someone who was achieving success. So when you talk about it in the context of the family environment, it's just being mindful and actually having those money conversations and just also being conscious for yourself. And that's why, mindful finance, being mindful around how you are spending money. I was taught from a very young age between wants and needs, but because I had a scarcity mindset, I automatically went, well, wants was almost forget it. So
Yeah.
I was focused on meeting the need side. And so I went without the want side for many years. And so that's where it's understanding and having that healthy balance, looking at where you are at the moment. And I know that times are really tough with regard to inflationary measures, but it's really looking at how can you meet those needs? And it doesn't necessarily have to be, those wants. It doesn't necessarily have to be done in an expensive way. You can go and meet that by going for a walk in the park, going for picnics, going to the movies, but maybe going to the movies using discounted tickets. So it's achieving the wants and the needs component in life and bringing that healthy awareness and balance. And your children will pick up on that, which is you can have a healthy relationship with money. It's just the management of how you manage money because, I had clients that, some earned a quarter of what others did. And they were by far wealthier, financially from an asset perspective in some cases, but wealthy from a holistic perspective in that they actually were able to enjoy life. They did a lot of things that didn't take a lot of money. And so it's just bringing in this whole concept that money is a tool which we use to enhance our lifestyle, but there is so much that you can do that doesn't cost a lot.
Mm.
Help.
Yeah, absolutely. And in my laser focus to try and get, you to give me an ins and outs list in terms of what's in, what's out of habits, attitudes, and beliefs and stories. I think just in listening to what you said there, it seems as though, and there is a question here, and that is that are all core beliefs bad? So are the things that we believe to be true about money, doing us a disservice? Or is there more about saying, okay, I need to understand what they are and what, how they're, where they are, what they are, how, and then examine how they are showing up in my life, and then what can I do or what do I maybe need to reframe or change or, do differently to be able to better serve, where I'm going or how I want to be with money and from reaching my goals perspective. So I guess the question is, what would you say? We're going on this journey of sort of like understanding what we believe to be true about money. What are our stories? Where do they come from? Are we looking for the bad or are we just looking to understand? Like what's the frame of mind that we should have?
Yeah, look, I think if you go in with an open curiosity, I have an insatiable level of curiosity. I love listening to people. I love listening to their stories. There is no right or wrong. There's just challenging behavior and we can all learn from that. So if I can use my own experience. So I grew up with very much a scarcity mindset. You have to work hard for money. Money doesn't grow on trees, which is funny because I came from an apple orchard business.
Yeah, that is bizarre.
Um,
Literally did grow on trees.
um, but that was my concept. So, I found that really challenging. And again, I'd associated this environment when I was taught around needs and wants. Okay, well, wants wasn't really something I was to focus on. And because I grew up on a farm, there is a lot of hard work on the farm. There's not a lot of downtime because there's always things to be done. Now, I can walk away from that and go, they're all bad. But the benefit of that is that hard work has got me to where I am today. It's provided me with great skills around, time management and learning how to sort of set myself up for success. But the other component of that is making me aware of how I choose my life. So before, when I was sitting in that scarcity mindset, it was, I have to work hard for my life. Whereas now, what's the learning from that? Okay, well, now I can start bringing balance into my life. So we definitely look at what may be more challenging in behavior. Again, nothing is right or wrong. Then we start to explore, how is that serving us and how is that not serving us? So from a you have to work hard for your money. And I was fortunate enough to have worked in a support role in investment banking, and some of these employees, would live on, 2 to 4 hours a night. So it made me become, very quickly aware of starting to want to bring, lifestyle choices back in, making sure that I'm looking after my health and caring for myself, but also, making time for work and the focus that I need to apply for the role that I'm in. It's brain, again, coming back into balance. So we're looking at, health, we're looking at relationships, and then we're looking at work or career aspect, and then trying to, I say balance, but it's never going to be like a third. It's always just what's going to work best for you.
Yeah, I think that's really important because that particular belief in general is quite common, in terms of what people think about money. And one, we live in, like, there's a bit of a hustle culture, depending on who you talk to, that sort of evolved over the last, little while. And I think that there are times in life where working hard is part of the course, depending on what stage of life you're in, what activities you're doing, if you're starting a business, for example. And so that belief and that belief which then guides that approach during those phases of life is not necessarily wrong. It's just that it's a period, and it's serving a purpose, as opposed to being how you approach money and life and work all the time to the exclusion of all other things, I guess is the point. I've had clients before who had, a scarcity mindset that was so extreme. It would be that they would be sitting on, say, $1 million, but with no physical place of residence because they don't want to spend money on anything, And it's like, I don't have enough money. I can't just be going out buying properties. You'd be like, what? So, there's like extremes that we deal with. And then there's the everyday sort of attitude around, well, yeah, we have to work hard, but that shouldn't mean that we go without, or that we make sacrifices for our financial future, like in the case of being stuck in a job, working overtime and never asking for what you're worth. That's sort of the balance, right?
Yeah, and I think, if we look at it from a perspective that 100%, work, the ability to be able to work hard, and there are stages, but it's actually understanding that wealth without connection isn't real wealth. You're just basically pooling all of this money. It's the connection that's going to give you true wealth. So whether that's with a relationship or with, the community or with family, it's understanding where that fits in. And again, if we don't have good health, and that's what I see quite often, is you work so hard at the detriment of your health because, the younger you are, the less it tends to show up. And as the older we are, that's when all of that, say stress and everything else that can come from overworking starts to show. And that's where I think, a lot of people, as they do get older, they do start to focus a lot more on their health because they've realized that was the thing that they actually let go of. And just to go back, you mentioned with regard to or alluded to sort of the FIRE movement, which I know is really strong. I see a lot of people struggle with the FIRE movement because they don't give themselves the flexibility to enjoy life. And if you're able to bring in that component of flexibility, and I'm not saying to extremes, travel to Europe every year, but if you can bring in a level of flexibility, you'll be able to sustain that FIRE movement longer.
Yeah. And that brings me to the next question, is helping people, part of this awareness is sort of helping people understand that financial well-being is very much an individual pursuit, for that very reason. I mean, there is no right or wrong necessarily. And there is no, when we think about financial success and personal finance and how we are taught to build our wealth and the order in which we must or might consider doing it, saving, getting out of debt, then maybe investing, then maybe contributing to super, then also paying off the mortgage. And it's very a linear thing, but you've just mentioned FIRE, and some people choose to do things in a completely different order. Some people would never consider investing whilst they still have a mortgage because paying down debt to nothing is the priority. And maybe that comes from growing up in a family where security was an issue and they just want to own their own home. So, I mean, what is it that you think people need to understand, I guess, about that, that journey? I mean, it's attached to your values, right? It's deciding what's important to you.
Yeah. And also it comes back to your beliefs because you're right. Someone who refuses to invest whilst they're paying down their mortgage will likely have come from a belief that was embedded younger. So it might have been the narrative is debt is bad. So all debt is bad. That the only thing you can rely on is having your own home. So that's why, you focus on doing that. And again, it will depend on the circumstances in which you've grown up. Someone that's traveled and moved, consistently through childhood won't have, or potentially, I reframe that, potentially may not have as much, that need to either settle down. But in saying that, because they moved around, that might be their biggest driving need. And the only way that we really start to unpack that is understanding your values, because when we start to understand what your values are, so is it safety and security? In that case, then maybe that is, if you don't get your house paid down as soon as possible, you're always going to have this level of uncertainty. There's definitely more unpacking to that because if it's just the home, there's usually other stuff. And that's why I say it's not always about the money. It's quite often not about the money. It's the attachment. But because the money is so emotionally driven, we attach that belief to it and it becomes so obvious because of that connection. So it's really understanding from a values perspective, and an easy way to start looking into this or checking if this is really your value, start checking in and checking your bank statements because it's going to tell you where you're spending your money. And that's going to give you some indication of, well, first of all, that's what saying my values are. So if you go to the gym, maybe health is one of your, highest values. So that's going to be, or anything sort of health related. If you are shopping, then it's going to be, maybe that external reward or looking, beautiful in whatever clothing you're choosing to put on. That might come from there. But then it's also unpacking. Is there something else that's coming out that you feel the need to constantly be, spending all the time? Because someone, again, it comes back to that emotional side. What are you getting from that emotionally? So from the gym perspective, what are you getting from that emotionally? Maybe it's just the endorphins of feeling good, your body feels great, it gives you more energy to operate in the day. From someone who likes to shop and change their fashion and buy new fashion all the time, maybe it's that feeling of feeling good and, getting the compliments. And so it's understanding that relationship that you have with yourself, but definitely checking in with your bank statements will give you an early indicator. And it will also give you an indicator if you're spending across those different areas, relationships, health, career, because sometimes, again, with a scarcity mindset, you may feel you can't invest in yourself. So there may be a lacking in spending in areas that could grow you. So personal development, coaching, how can you expand your awareness to become a better version of yourself so that you're a better version in your family environment, that, friendship, in the work environment?
Yeah. So I'm always intrigued by this sort of like what feeds what, when it comes to mindset. So we've talked about values and we've talked about beliefs, and then we've got attitudes, and then we've also got behavior. So, I mean, do you believe that values drive beliefs, or do you believe that beliefs drive values? What do you think is the relationship there, or is it symbiotic? They feed into each other.
They sort of do. And look, your values will change
Mm.
as you evolve. And I've seen this going from, because I've been doing personal development for quite a number of years and coaching. And even when I started out, so if you've got low self-worth, your values potentially will reflect that. And so it's coming back into that belief about yourself. As your belief around yourself and that, feeling of self-worth and self-love, then those values will also change to reflect that. So the way I see it is that your beliefs are impacting your values, and they are definitely, the behaviors are coming from your beliefs
Mm.
because you've attached that experience. So you have an experience and then you make a decision around that experience and then you form a belief. And then so that belief informs your decisions and the behavior aspect of that. So I do believe that if you change your beliefs, that will have an impact on what your values are, because all too often, depending on where you are in terms of whether you feel good about yourself or you don't, it will determine how you show up. Again, in relationships, at work, which determines your values.
Yeah. So where do you start? What is the starting point for peeling back the onion of this at an individual level?
I would start bringing curiosity to your decisions that you're making. And one of the first questions, and from a money perspective, I start asking, which is, what was the money environment about, like work, when you were growing up? What's your earliest memory of money? And normally what I would do is take a client through like a timeline and get them to start writing down the earliest memories. So we can sort of start to unpack how that's played out from, a belief perspective. And then it's really understanding, where do they feel their relationship is with money now? So do you feel that you have a confident, positive relationship with money? Or do you find challenge a bit of a stress? There's a constant anxiety around money. You might be living pay to pay. You might be struggling to get on top of your finances. Um, where's that coming from? And the other thing to ask yourself is, are you comfortable with receiving money, or are you more comfortable with giving money? So that those questions are really going to start to help peel back the layers of the onion to start understanding and bringing that awareness to your relationship with money. Because it's, a lot of people aren't aware that there is this relationship with money that's driven by their beliefs.
Yeah, that's so insightful. I mean, take now, for example, the current climate that we're in from a financial and economic perspective. I think the, but let's say the majority, or most, many, the majority of people would sit down with a blank sheet of paper looking at their financial situation and be a little bit, have some trepidation, have some anxiety, some dissatisfaction. Um, and that could be circumstantial, to a large percentage of that. Those emotions could be as a result of the circumstances. But then there's also a portion there where whatever their relationship with their self is, or whatever their relationship with their money and their beliefs is, it could also be driving, a part of that. I mean, how do you say to someone who comes to you now, who's stressed, anxious about money, worried about the scarcity of it, just based on issues like job security, for example, in this environment and things? Is it just a process of like eliminating out the environmental and saying, well, all of those things are, to be expected, and it's to be expected that you feel like money is scarce, or that, potentially you're unhappy with your current circumstances, or worried or anxious about money, unable to save properly and get ahead or grow your wealth in this environment, versus what's sitting underneath there that's contributing to that? Is it just the same process that you go through with that person?
It's similar because often when we're in that state, we are just really being driven by emotion. And normally it is that scarcity mindset of just going, I don't know where I'm going to get the money from. It's really coming back and bringing that awareness and understanding that, yes, this situation is occurring now, but it's not a lifelong event. You've got the choice to be able to change that. And so it's really, again, starting to peel back the onion and looking at it from almost a third party point of view, looking in and saying, what is actually coming up for me? Why is this coming up for me? And what's driving that? And you're right, there's so many situations that are outside their control, but what's the opportunity in the situation? If you've experienced a redundancy, what's the opportunity in that? Where is maybe that's actually forcing you to start pursuing, a career path in the direction you wanted to go anyway, or maybe it's actually moving you into a field of work that you're naturally going to align to. And the reason I say that is because I went through a redundancy in my 20s when the company I worked with got taken over and pretty much all of the staff got moved out. I've gone through different career changes throughout my life, and it's always moved me in the direction that I needed to go to. So it's actually, during those times, money might be really scarce. How can you work with that situation? Again, getting clarity on where money's coming through. And that's why we talk about quite often having a cash flow plan or budget, not to live by day, but just to have a benchmark of where things are. And stepping into really looking at it from more of an abundance mindset. So the easiest way to do that is starting to express gratitude for what you have, because in those times we quite often go to what we don't have. We don't have the money, can't pay for food, or we're struggling. And if you're at that point, then there are, resources, there's organizations out there to be able to contact and get some financial support from that point of view. But say you've gone through an experience where maybe you have lost your job, or there is uncertainty, you're in maybe a contract role or a part-time role. It's really starting to look at that from an abundance mindset. What are you gratitude for what you are? What can you express gratitude for what you have in terms of your ability to maybe meet day-to-day expenses? And what are you learning in the role that you are learning? And then taking that further, how can I learn more? So it might be going to the library and learning personal development skills, reading around people that are successful, improving your knowledge around finances and how to manage money. So there's so many free resources online, through libraries, free courses online that you can actually start to improve your skill set. But it's just stepping out of, there's nothing there. No one, it's almost shutting down to going, okay, well, what can I do in this situation?
Yeah.
How can I explore different opportunities to bring in money? Can I update my resume? Can I go and let family and friends know? Can I get on LinkedIn and let people know that I'm looking for opportunities? So there's always another view of looking at it. It's just that what happens is when money becomes very tight and you go into a position of scarcity and real doubt and anxiety and stress, it seems to shut down that creative ability to look out and look at what is possible.
Yeah. And so whether or not I mean, that just seems to be like a natural response almost, or an instinctual response to that financial stress, or uncertainty. And so, going back to the topic of this conversation, knowing our relationship with ourselves, having some awareness about how we typically move through challenging times from a mental framework perspective. I think a lot of what you talked about there is sort of comes from the discipline of positive psychology and sort of framing up how, what's your toolkit, that you can employ to move through this situation. And yes, there's objective components to it from a financial wellbeing perspective. Like, do you have a cash flow plan, or is your income greater than your expenses as a minimum? And, is there capacity in there to create stability, at least through this period? And then there's the subjective, which is all things you've just mentioned. How can I reframe how I think about this situation to help, not hinder what I'm trying to achieve? So just while we're on this current theme of, the here and now and the financial, circumstances that everyone finds themselves in at the moment, because it's quite topical, it's relevant, and the majority of people are all going through it in one way or another. When we talk about stories and beliefs, we sort of always speak about it in the past. Where did they come from? How were they formed? And how are they influencing our life today? One of the things I started to think about recently in relation to this is, through COVID, for example, a lot of people, there was lockdowns, no one was allowed to go anywhere. The national savings rate went through the roof because nobody could spend money on anything. And, for 2 years, people were, in Melbourne, were locked up for a long time. And so off the back of that, people have only just sort of started to feel like normal life has resumed again. And we've seen an increase in spending. And over the last Christmas period, all the shops sort of were noting that people were spending more and people were eating out and all of that, even though we had these talks of recession looming and interest rates going up and inflation rising. My theory is that people just have changed their mindset through COVID. They've sort of formed the view, I've even thought about it myself, life's very short, things can change quickly. So now I find myself even thinking about, where we might have gone away every second or third school holidays. I find us going away every school holidays, because I think, well, life's short, we've got some spare cash, so let's enjoy our time with family. Even eating out a little bit more throughout the month than we would have normally. I think our time frame has been condensed a little bit, and we sort of think, well, we could be locked down again if we had another pandemic. That wasn't a thing that we thought about 5 years ago. So how do things like this change, or how are you seeing, are they changing mindsets? And is this creating a new sort of mental model or story around money for everyone that has the potential to, and how is it going to influence us? Obviously, if we spend too much money, that's going to have a negative impact on our finances. So what are the checks and balances that we need to implement at an individual level to make sure the stories that we're writing as we go about money don't interrupt our plan?
Yeah. And I think, the last word you just mentioned is plan, which is really starting to plan, because the biggest question, we've seen the great resignation occur worldwide, where people have just gone, I've had enough. They're either doing a sea change, tree change, or, they're moving overseas. It's actually planning. It comes down to planning and looking at it from a point of view. Again, it comes bring in the values, because if you're meeting your values consistently, you won't feel this need to be constantly um, escaping. I always look at it from perspective. Are you moving away from the situation, or are you moving towards something? So coming back to COVID, to talk about the COVID situation, I'm in Melbourne, definitely 2 years of pretty much being in lockdown. We aren't naturally formed to be by ourselves. We thrive on connection. And I'm seeing that down here. A lot of people are really wanting to come back. They're wanting to embrace, we're having a reasonable summer here. So people are really wanting to get out and about and make the most of that. And that's through, fashion. So spending money on fashion. That's on the social environment. So going out to restaurants and, you know, they're just that craving. And I don't feel that a lot of people have actually met that need, because it was almost 2 years we're in lockdown. It's still, people are still slowly catching up. And there's only so many people you can catch up in a limited amount of time, unless you go to a big function. So I see that still playing out for a while yet. But it's actually, if you're planning and you're actually catering for those different areas in your life, so you're doing planning for now, for medium term, for longer term, as long as you've got money going to those areas, then you can achieve that. So if you can afford to go away and that aligns to what your values are on a more regular basis, or eating out, then that's going to serve you at the moment. And that may change over time, because you may get to a point and go, well, actually, no, we don't enjoy that. Or maybe you do, but it's also being consciously aware. Are you on the pathway, and are you hitting those, short to medium goals to get to where you want to get eventually? So, and that is when it comes back to what you mentioned before. The personal finance journey is a very personalized finance journey. You might be someone who wants to retire at age 40. You might be someone who's prepared to work until you're 70 or 80. My dad, he is 82 next month, and he retired in December. So it just goes to show everyone has a different journey of what they're willing to sort of put in, and that determine where that expenditure comes in. It's just understanding to, is it because you're maybe say the example is eating out, and I see that come up quite often with a lot of my clients, and a lot of it comes back to the fact that they are overworking. And they're actually prioritizing other areas of their life. When they start looking and going, actually, I want to start prioritizing my health and my well-being, what they find is, in actual fact, they take that back on, because you're choosing to take responsibility in that area. But time will come in. It depends. If you don't have the time, then it's outsourcing those things that you don't enjoy, if you can afford to do so, whilst it not being at the detriment of other areas of your life. And I see, some people have moved. We've had a recent situation in the media, I believe, that, a couple moved overseas, and they're now having to come back to Australia for medical care for a child. And it's understanding, just if you are going to do something like that, make sure you're starting to build, or have built, a buffer of money to be able to enable you that freedom. So if we look at abundance is the ability to have choice. And the way we have choice is to be set up financially so that you've got funds available to be able to do, like you mentioned, you've got choice because you've got funds available at the moment to increase the amount of meals that you have out, increase the holidays away. So that financial freedom, and that's where, when we attach that financial freedom and we unpack what the beliefs are that are driving all those decisions, that's when we start to see a level of harmony.
Yeah, because I just find that, if we accept that money stories and beliefs are sort of born out of lived experience as children and as we grow up, then those stories continue to be sort of written in a way. Maybe we don't call them stories. Maybe they're just the narrative or the script that we have going in our head. When a new script is added when we make future financial decisions born out of a recent lived experience, like COVID, for example. So I think it's key for people to kind of recognize how that may have changed recently compared to how it was before. And just again, through that same process, when you're just examining how these things have arrived in your life from your childhood, are they serving you or are they not? And where's the balance? I think another example is probably, of this narrative script changing through life as we go and through the experiences that we have. It's, as a result of divorce or, a relationship breakdown, domestic violence, being fired and losing your income on the spot. Those kinds of things are like, create a financially shocking event or have it leave an imprint on you in a way. And then that sort of reshapes, if you like, the stories and the scripts that you tell yourself going forward. It might be that you've been divorced and now you're left with nothing. And then, so you'll never, cohabitate, with someone from a financial perspective going forward. And that may just be a disservice to you in the future. Just those sorts of things. I mean, are those things as well that you think are important for people to sort of examine as they go through life?
Absolutely, because you're right. So significant events will change your beliefs, or they may even confirm your beliefs. So it's looking at those decisions that you're making, how are they actually serving you? So for some people, it works for them to actually live separately and manage their finance separately, because as soon as they come into a situation of cohabitating, then unless they've got a financial agreement in place, that is going to change, a lot of the structural issues around money and who ends up with the money if something should happen to someone. So if as long as you're aware of what the intention is, and maybe from a relationship perspective, are you clear on that? You're both comfortable with that? Because again, if one's not comfortable, then that's going to add friction to the relationship. But it does come back, those beliefs that we formed at such a young age will likely be influencing the beliefs that have changed. Yes, they may change because of a significant trauma, or they might evolve, might be more the word, in terms of a significant trauma such as a divorce or separation, or someone passes away suddenly, or another experience. But it's just being mindful of, how is the decision I'm making serving me? Because you can go into almost a state of free fall, which is, maybe there's been a devastating event that's occurred and it's like, that's it, I'm living all my life and I'm just going to spend my money, but not taking into account, well, what do I get? What am I getting out of this? And then what will happen to me when I'm done? So say it's occurring and you're close to retirement. Maybe someone's prepared to take that risk and they're happy to live on the age pension.
Yeah.
But that's the uncertainty they've got to go into, and they've got to be comfortable. So again, it's bringing back that conscious mindfulness to the choice that you're making, which is, are you moving towards something? I want the freedom. I want to be able to enjoy life. Or are you doing it in a way that is just, it's an emotional reaction?
Yeah. And I'll share another example of something I came across recently at the other end of the life spectrum. There was an opinion piece written in a pretty prominent newspaper by someone in their early 20s who was expressing their frustration with financial forecasting, people talking to them about the beautiful thing of compound interest, and how, over time, time is their greatest asset, and through superannuation and even investing outside super, they have the ability to build financial security over the long term. But their views have been changed or altered on that long term because of climate change. So because that's become such a focus for that generation, they were expressing this sentiment that, well, why should we bother? Because the planet, the human population is be extinct by 2030 or something. So I think, and that's not, I don't say that to criticize that perspective, but what I think is important to realize in that is that, well, you had the ability to future proof your own personal success and financial success and stability and security. And, um, as the world moves towards trying to rectify the issues that we have with the environment and with climate change, I mean, to turn a blind eye to your own, financial security and success and doing what you must or should in order to sort of make sure that you're set up for your future. I mean, the downside risk of taking that point of view is that you're left with nothing in retirement, if that's a prolonged sort of perspective. So I think that's just another example of the way, that I've come across of the way people's views about their financial well-being are being influenced through these lived experiences. And it's just really interesting to me. I don't know what your perspective is on that point of view or what advice you might have for young people, if that's a line of thinking that they're sort of, entertaining. But there's a really big risk in sort of that very black and white thinking about life.
And there is, I saw this quote, which doesn't summarize this perfectly, but it's a good insight. It says, live life as if you're going to die tomorrow, but learn as if you're going to live forever. And I think the perception that we've got to take is that we're going to live as long as we need to live. And so we do need to plan for the longer term, because even with climate change coming in, there's been so many developments that who's to say that we're not going to continue to live on another planet. And I say that loosely because we just don't know. But if you're almost shutting down now, I speak to clients around this. You're either at cause, which is you're taking ownership and responsibility for your decisions and everything you do, and versus effect, which it's someone else's issue. It's for them to fix. It's never my problem. And what happens is if you start falling into that effect, it's someone else's issue. I mean, even the commentary you just mentioned then, we're not going to be here. Climate change, is going to eradicate the world. Then you're living at effect. But if we can bring ourselves back up and we can live at cause, which is it's my responsibility. What can I do to plan for my future? And as part of that, how can I actually make mindful decisions to support that evolution of change? And that might be, making more ethical decisions around how you're investing. So it's actually looking at, again, what are the options there rather than there's nothing there. I'm going to sit in this and I'm just going to expect someone else to fix the problem. And, I'm going to spend all my money and there's going to be another solution that's come in. Because one of the big things I think, I see quite often working with clients is this lacking in responsibility around money, in that someone else has always managed the finances, or they've passed the responsibility to someone else. I did a post yesterday and, for Valentine's, and I predominantly work with female clients, but, a man is not a financial plan, a parent is not a financial plan, a sibling, a colleague, family member. No one is a financial plan. You are the one that's responsible for your financial decisions, because at the end of the day, it's going to give you choice. So if you choose to spend all your money and not have money, then you've actually just taken that choice away. And I say, again, that loosely, because there are situations people are living pay to pay because of financial circumstances. But if you've got the choice to be able to have money and be able to invest for the longer term, medium term, and the short term, why wouldn't you do that? Because that's more of you living at cause and taking responsibility. But again, you've got that option to be able to start, advocating for climate change, for investing in ethical investments. There's so much that you can explore and unpack there.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, thank you so much, Suzanne. That was amazing conversation, so much in there for everyone. And hopefully we've helped everyone see that link, that very deep and intrinsic link between our own person and understanding ourselves and how that shows up and impacts our financial well-being. So thank you for your time.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me today.